welcome back to the Hyperspace Challenge webinar series. We're glad to have you all joining. We're starting to see more and more people joining in the webinar today. So super glad to have you here for this really important conversation. As you're joining, if you want to just take a moment and take the opportunity to introduce yourself in the chat, let us know where you're joining from. We always just love to see all of the different places and communities that are represented here in our webinar. So yeah, please do that. Also, sometimes people put their LinkedIns in the chat. That's another great way to connect if you'd like. I'll just introduce myself. I am Dorothy Duran. I'm the Senior Program Manager of the Hyperspace Challenge. Thank you for being here for today's webinar. This webinar series is hosted by the Hyperspace Challenge, Air Force Research Laboratory, and the U.S. Space Force to help strengthen the connections between founders, researchers, commercial innovators, and government stakeholders across the space and defense innovation ecosystem. Our goal with this series is to address common roadblocks faced by companies and universities that are working to support government missions, especially in areas like commercialization, funding, partnerships, and technology transition. Today's webinar is titled Inside the SBIR Black Box, How Winners Actually Get Selected. It was a very highly requested topic that we chose from your survey responses, so we do listen to those. It's going to be a great discussion today. We hope to demystify the SBIR review and selection process, provide practical insights that can help improve proposal competitiveness, and help founders avoid some of the most common evaluation pitfalls. Our goal is for attendees to leave with a clearer understanding of what happens behind the scenes after submission and how to strengthen future SBIR applications based on reviewer expectations. Before we begin, I just want to give a quick reminder that we'll have some time after the discussion for Q&A. Please do utilize the Q&A function, which will be like at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat for questions. This just makes it easier so that all of the questions are in one place and makes it easier for our moderator to see them and to address them during the discussion. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Roxanne Aragon, who has a deep background in connecting startups, government, and private capital. Roxanne will be moderating today's conversation and leading our panel through this important discussion. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Roxanne. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dorothy. It is a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, my first job working in space was at the Hyperspace Challenge, getting close to 10 years ago now, so maybe not quite that long, but it's been amazing to be on this journey, see all the evolutions in SBIR and STTR, and yeah, my absolute passion is helping companies figure out how to break in, get their technology, funding, get a customer, and get it developed so it actually can be used in space. Really, really excited to be on this panel. This is something, like I mentioned, is really what I care most about, is helping folks out so they're not spinning their wheels, spending time on proposals that aren't going to go anywhere. I would love to let my panelists perhaps introduce themselves. If we could start with Rachel, and then we'll kick it to you, Troy, and then we'll pop into some questions.
Hey folks, glad to be here with you today. My name's Rachel Braun. I'm at SpaceWorks at the U.S. Space Force's innovation arm. My background is in software development and C2 systems. And then since I came to AFWorks and then SpaceWorks, I was working for a long time on the flagship technology portfolio, which is basically the emerging tech portfolio where companies and startups get to propose their ideas to the Air Force and Space Force. Now solely on the space side, and have experience reviewing hundreds and hundreds of SBIRs that are proposals over a number of years and managing evaluation rounds as well. So excited to talk to you more about things that you should know and keep in mind as you're going through this process from the other side.
And then I'm Troy, co-founder and CEO for Call Morris Inc. So at KMI Space, we've won a half dozen different SBIR, STTR contracts. I've been very proud of that, and we'll be happy to share our experience of how you go from that 0 to 1, and then, oh gosh, you've actually won it. But it's something that we've also submitted probably close to 100 that haven't worked. So there's a lot of lessons to learn. I'm not sure how many Rachel has had to read herself, but it's something that I've never stood in the shoes of the government customer, but you learn to listen to them a lot. So I come from academia and public industry, working with critical industries, and now at KMI we are providing the tow trucks for space. So happy to tell more about good experiences, bad experiences, and I think by the end of this we'll be sharing contact information. So yeah, I think it's just always great to know where people are coming from, the perspective they have, and I'm happy to share mine here today. So Roxanne, I think back to you.
Yay, this is going to be so fun. A couple of housekeeping notes, as we mentioned. So this is being recorded, so you will be able to access it later if you do have to drop off, drop on, want to share this with some of your colleagues. And then, yes, we will be sharing contact information, but we are all, I think I can say for the three of us, very available via LinkedIn, easy to find that way. So don't worry about, if you don't get a chance to answer your question here, there's lots of ways to access us. There is a Q&A function. That's the best way to get your questions answered during this session. I love to see that folks are already connecting in the chat. Very cool. Keep doing that. But if you do have questions, we'll have dedicated time along the way, but I'll be keeping an eye out as we go. All right, let's get into it. So a couple of things that have already been alluded to. Rachel, it's not just once a proposal is submitted that's not the beginning of the process for you on the government side. I want to get into what happens once the proposal is submitted, but I think it does help a little bit if you could lay just some of the groundwork from your perspective of what happens to get to the point where a proposal is submitted, who's involved, and then from there, let's talk about what happens when that SBIR proposal actually drops in front of a proposal or a set of evaluators.
Yeah, totally. Sounds great. So we start working months ahead of time, ahead of any solicitation that you see open. We did become known for being able to go from solicitation to award faster than anyone else. But all of that time frame, there's always work on the front end. And so on the front end, there's a ton of work in either topic development or in setting up what the solicitation looks like ahead of time. But the most important part for you guys is that outside of topic development and all that prep work that goes into that, we also are getting evaluators on board really, 2 to 3 months ahead of time. That is when all the evaluators are being pulled in, requested, and there are different scenarios. Sometimes it's an open call within the Air Force and Space Force for expertise, and in other scenarios for different types of topics, there are very particular experts from one group who are asked to come in and evaluate. There's a ton of work that goes into really figuring out where everyone's expertise is in, looking over people's educational backgrounds, their work backgrounds to make sure that we're getting the right people looking to your evaluations and making sure they're covering down on the right areas. And there's obviously a range because it's the entire U.S. Air Force and Space Force who are supporting solicitations. And that can be a range from their super technical folks who are very technical in one area to folks who are more business and commercialization focused to folks who are really focused on where your technology is going to meet a need within the larger Department of War. So not just Air Force and Space Force, going from there. And you may be saying, hey, we're talking about space here. Why are you talking about air? There are certain things that the Space Force does not have in its personnel including military and civilians, that we will ask the Air Force support for, because there's just not duplication there. So you will get evaluators who are from the Air Force and Space Force, because we're pulling folks with expertise across the board. So once those folks,
I just want to really, really like underline, highlight this, because you're talking about there's actual people coming who may or may not have subject matter expertise on this specific technology,
yeah,
real humans reading your proposals.
yes, yeah.
Yes. And so I like to underline that, because I think sometimes people just, you put it into the black box, you get a response back, but it's real people, it's a real audience. You have to think about people sitting down at a desk reading. I don't know, sometimes how many of these have you had to sit through and read in one setting, you personally?
Oh, well, you can only really do like 3 in a day max if you're really reading through them. But over the course of a solicitation, you can be responsible for higher numbers than that for sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
just trying to build some empathy on the reviewer side and help people understand like the importance of, like, if you just give me tech specs, tech specs, tech specs, just for context, guys. So just flagging some of the things here we're thinking about as we're going into this. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Rachel, but so
No.
that's the front end. And then so you already got
Yeah.
into some of like what happens once those proposals hit
Totally.
desks.
And once those proposals hit, there's that solicitation period that you all are submitting within. Once that date closes, that is when the real push happens. So there's all this prep work that's gone into it. The push happens, and then all that information, because all of your proposals go into one larger site for the entire DOW. And then that push, all that data, the proposal data, all the information about your company then needs to go populate into a number of different sites, because of course it is the Air Force and Space Force, and there are some kind of little bureaucratic separations between some of the tools. So as those start filtering down, then we know which proposals are coming in. The proposals get assigned to experts who are in the areas that are needed for those specific proposals. And then folks get a review period so they can reject it. If I look at something and I say, this is a hardware thing, this is a C2 hardware thing, and this is not my deal, I would kick it back and I'd say, hey, I'm not the right person. Or if I have a company who my friend is an executive at the company or something that I know a lot about them, that would also be one where I just say, hey, this is not something that I can touch, so somebody else needs to review this. So then we're going through that process for a little bit to make sure that we have the right people to evaluate. And then, it gets locked down, and we start reading through all the evaluations from there.
Is there anywhere public? I've seen some things. I know, like reading the solicitations themselves. Where can people find out how they're like what they're getting evaluated against? I know, like in broad strokes, there's some guidance on the spacework side.
Totally. So it's going to depend which type of topic you have. But in general, the best place to go outside of, if there's a webinar hosted, you should always go to the webinar, because it'll be helpful to have somebody explain the solicitation, the topic, in different language than is in the topic itself. But what is created on our side for each solicitation or each topic that comes out is a rubric. And the rubric is the thing that's not shared with everyone externally. But it's not a secret. It's written based off of what was written in the solicitation or the topic. And it's built out based on that. And so that will never be shared. That exact rubric will never be shared, but it's all built off of the language that's been put in the topic or the solicitation specifically. But in general, the kind of things that you want to think about, the three easiest buckets are thinking about really technical capability of what you're proposing, the defense need, and then the commercialization potential overall. Those are the top three buckets that it's easiest for us to talk about the rubric needs with you outside of the specifics that are needed for each topic, based on whichever area it's focused in.
Yeah, super helpful. That's what I've heard is definitely those three buckets are must. And with that, I'm going to kick it to Troy. Rachel, that gives us some good stuff to chew on to start. And I realize here for folks, if you're absolutely new to SBIR, STTR, we are talking about this a little bit more advanced than complete entry level here. So if you need more help and resources, reach out to Hyperspace, reach out to me, whoever, we can point you in the direction of some resources. The SpaceWorks website itself can be helpful, and we'll dive into that some more in the questions. But just I wanted to make sure that's clear for folks that this isn't completely total entry SBIR 101. So if you're looking for that, there are resources that exist that we can get you to. So Troy, with that in mind, at one point you did not have multiple SBIR awards, and I'll let you speak to all the awards and success to date for KMI, but it's definitely been a journey. We know that. I think I first met you several years ago through Orbital Prime, which already is a few years back. So talk to us. I want to hear a little bit about the sad parts too, though. Like how long did it take before you got the first one, or what was some of the feedback you get? Like one of those things, like, did you ever get a selected, not awarded, that kind of, like, no, we don't have to go. I don't want to go too deep into that whole wormhole, but talk to me about some of the pain of getting started here and how you worked your way through it.
Yeah, I'll start with that last one because I think it's interesting from a outside perspective. Is that our last effort of government contracting that we've gotten final word on was selectable, not funded. Um, Go back 4 or 5 years, we put in a really good proposal. We had talked to some people that I think this was a NASA proposal, and we got selectable, not funded. It happens at both ends of the spectrum. At the beginning, you're trying to figure things out, and sometimes, as we found out from that year ago NASA issue, it wasn't our fault. It was that sometimes you can do everything right and just not win, and that sometimes budget, that sometimes a champion has been promoted, moved on, something new happened from Rachel and team all trying to do a proposal process as fast as possible. In 90 days, the whole world can change. So it's something to, keep in mind that it is a flexible and influx world that we're working with. Sometimes that's to your advantage. Orbital Edge really went from something we were trying kind of in the darkness to straight right down our strike zone. So it's something that I can say that there was probably at least 18 months of solid effort of building the company, talking to the industry, figuring out the customer set of problems where we didn't win a darn thing. We applied many times to NSF, to NASA. I've still won $0 from either of those organizations, but we finally found our groove, our spot. And when we won our first few SBIRs, I guess they were STTRs, we were also only winning 50% of what we had submitted. So even in a win, there's what was wrong with those three proposals? Like, well, let's also focus on what was right in those other three that were selected. Um, and so I think that's one part I wanted to really highlight with the topic here today is that just as much as it feels like from the proposer side of, we're trying to tell you how great our technology is and how this is the one thing that's going to change the defense need and it's going to commercially make billions of dollars, we are also writing into a black box with our black box. As a reviewer opens up this package of, one of a few that they're going to try and get through this week, they don't know who you are. You might have a name that, doesn't exactly say towtrucksinspace.com. There's no clues. And so they're trying their best to come into this with fresh information, fresh eyes. And so that's my first piece of advice, especially to the highly technical founders out there. I've had the pleasure of speaking with so many people who are way smarter than myself, And about 3, 4 minutes in the conversation, I have no idea what they're working on. I have no idea what they're excitedly telling me on. And this is a face-to-face communication where I can be like, hey, excuse me, sir, ma'am, you sound so excited. What the heck is this nano thruster? What does it do? What is the, takeaway part? And I think that's a piece that is important to establish early on is that, hey, Joe Schmo Company, read this solicitation. I can tell you why what I'm doing is important and then back it up. I think too often, many from the technical side back up why what we're doing is great, and then down in the last line, and in conclusion, we solve your problem. And it's just hard for humans to read through all that and be like, okay, so know what we're talking about. Are we talking about cyber? Are we talking about space? Are we talking about materials? Okay, that might be what they're talking about. So if there's any of the notes of my ramblings to jot down, the bottom line up front, that was a real big inflection point for us as a small company was understanding we really need to just make it easy for the audience, make it easy for whether you're talking to a group of brilliant people across the country, you're talking to students in a classroom, or you're talking to a reviewer 6 weeks separated by written word. Bottom line up front, and then give your evidence. Hit everything that Rachel said of we build our own rubrics inside of KMI when we're preparing to submit against something, and we check across that like a flight list, is that we do not let this leave the runway until we've checked off every single piece, because I'm never sure which thing that was mentioned in the solicitation is, 5 points or 50 points. Hit them all. We can, just takes time and effort to get it right. And again, bottom line up front. So I'll stop there. But I think those were some of the big pieces is that just as much as we're trying to compete against a black box, they're getting 100 black boxes coming in through their inbox. So, Roxanne, I'll toss back.
I love that so much. Yeah, because I'm a non-technical person. Oftentimes people ask me to take a quick look at a proposal before they submit, and exactly that experience where it's just like, even if I kind of know the company, know what they say they're doing, if you don't anchor for people what's going to be discussed in each of these paragraphs that can get really technically dense, it's not to say throw it all out. It's just to say you got to give me an anchor so I understand the context in which you're presenting the information. So, Rachel, going back to you, I think first wanted your thoughts on Troy's approach here, and then I also wanted to there was a question here about breaking up the monotony in proposals. And of course, there's no one right way, but I'd love to see, looking across proposals, I'm sure there's some approaches that, might, I know you can't speak to all the government. I know you can't speak to everyone, but anything that, you think are best practices for presenting material effectively.
Totally. And I do want to compliment Troy. 50% success rate is pretty darn awesome. So if other people don't meet that, that that success rate is amazing. So don't feel bad if you're not there or not there yet. So awesome, Troy. So in general, things for formatting and how you set things up. The first thing I would say is do not be worried that the evaluators are bored by your content. And don't start going crazy with formatting. This is mainly a joke, but don't think that you need to do a crazy color or a crazy font to get people's attention. It's honestly just going to be annoying to be able to try to read something in a hot pink font. The content of the proposals is generally so interesting that you really want to pore over it in multiple different ways before also going back as an evaluator and reviewing based on specific criteria within the rubric. And so just thinking from the evaluator's perspective, when an evaluator is looking over your proposal, like for me, I would read it over in depth, make sure I understand where the proposal is going, what Troy was making the comment about, sometimes having to go back and be like, wait, what are they saying? I missed, that introductory section. It's like it wasn't clear what they were talking about. So once we're reading through, then we may go back through to try to, really get to that bottom line up front to understand what it is that the technology does. The clearest point that I would say for you going through and writing your proposals is make sure that anything is that's listed in the solicitation, make sure it is very clear and very obvious. There are either bullet points or numbers within those solicitations. There are specifics on like, hey, the technical volume is third and it should be, 17 pages long or whatever it is for that particular solicitation. Make sure that you are following those grading criteria to a T. And I've heard folks complain a lot that, oh, it's really difficult to read the solicitation, and it is, except for the fact that our procuring contracting officer who writes those spends so much time trying to make sure that it is both as succinct and categorized as possible for you. And a ton of people pour over that. So just when you're looking over the solicitation, don't think of the solicitation itself as a black box. Think of it more as these like building blocks that you need to go through to make sure that you've checked the boxes along the way. And when I say checking the boxes, it's truly as simple as just making sure things are in the right order. When it's asking for, hey, proof of commercialization potential, basically like proof that you have interest in your business, that would be sales, it would be interest from different government organizations, different private sector organizations. Just make sure that you hit on each of the points that is asked for in the solicitation, because really the evaluator, once they read through for that, initial understanding of what you do, is looking to find, what your company's answers are to that rubric effectively.
And I want to add on to that to one part you hit there, Rachel. Of I've never considered hot pink as a text color, and my eyes hurt for that. The kind of rule we've used, because trying to give from our side of the table what's helped people get this down is to in the sake of an analogy, icebergs. Is that if you're looking at an entire page of text and you're like, there's a great thing here, I want to show you this. That's the thing to maybe call out. Maybe you do your paragraph break so that that is an opening line of the next paragraph, or there's a visual that would help represent it. I think to my most technical days of reading academic journals, even in those, there's normally a call out of a graph or a visual representation, a wheel that points out the same thing that the whole page of text is talking about. But if there's a key point, you don't want to cover the whole thing in icebergs because that's an ice field. No one goes through it. But also sometimes the open ocean of just wall of text and text, it's hard to see what's important. So that's where, I've come to the point of, okay, is there an iceberg that can help represent and capture this checklist of items that, they want to hear your commercialization plan this year, 5 years from now, and 10 years from now? That could be a very small little visual somewhere that just helps make sure you hit your point and that you defend it. And yes, hopefully helps the human person without getting highlighter over everything. Because if you highlight everything, you've highlighted nothing.
I want to add one thing also based on a comment that I just saw pop up in the chat. So everyone wants a one-page requirement or one-page checklist requirement, and I am all totally in agreement at simplifying and making things clear. There will not ever be a one-page addition to the solicitation, because the solicitation, you can basically think of it as a number of different documents all put into one. And that document has to go be approved through all the legal check boxes. It needs to go through PA for, releasability approval. It needs to go up through a number of different offices within the Office of the Secretary of War before it goes out. And so it's just never going to be separated. But the thing that you should look for is there is a page that, it's part of the solicitation, but there's a page that explains which things are required. And it's basically just says like, hey, here's what needs to be in your intro, technical volume. And that section will show you what is required and what is optional. And our procuring contracting officer, who is the owner of those solicitation documents that go out. That person is so good about making sure it either says required or optional. So any, if you ever have like a need for that one page and you just want to know some place to start, you can just kind of search the document for optional or required. And that's a good way to go, just be brought to that section immediately. And it'll be like one individual section that shows you what the whole layout should look like. And that's another tip, big time, that you want to do is like Control F in the solicitation document. Anytime you're thinking, man, I don't know if this is optional. I don't know if, where it's going to give me the specifics that I need for the technical volume. If it requires a graph or something like Troy talked about, Control F, or Command F is your best friend, when working with the solicitation documents, because it is a lot of information.
Yeah, you really gotta dive deep because even, there might be small nuances between different solicitations, even to when you get to the point where you feel like you've done hundreds of them. I saw once a company put a whole solicitation or put a whole proposal together, didn't realize that they had downloaded the, original solicitation, but there had been an update to the solicitation where you had to upload the final proposal slightly differently. And so, just completely disqualified them from the whole thing, also because it was last minute. So make sure you're looking at the latest version of the solicitation. Try your best not to submit it at the very last minute. But with that said, we are getting a couple questions that have already been touched on by both of you around the commercialization piece. So I want to say again, Rachel flagged for us the three kind of core things that all of these right now in SpaceWorks are going to be evaluated on are your fit with the mission, that you have a defense customer, you're actually something that the Space Force or the greater DoW needs long term. We can talk about that if there's interest from folks about how you actually learn about that. We've talked about the technical piece a bit, but commercialization, it's really hard, especially if you're talking SBIR, STTR, your early technology readiness. You might be a new company, you might just be forming a company, might be partnering with a research institution. Troy, how did you approach this when you were really early days in your company, talking about what your commercialization was when maybe you hadn't really commercialized yet?
Yeah, no, it is a huge challenge, and it is easy to accept a, doom perspective of, oh, well, if they just let me build it, I'll show them how I'll commercialize it. That's just not the way things work. So what we found is, okay, if we don't ourselves yet as a younger company have that expertise or have that, I don't want to use the word respect, but for lack of a better word, respect in the industry yet that what we're saying is true, go find those that have earned that have the years or the stars that what they say matters. I pulled up from I call it my Space Bible. This is, a whole page I have from back in, some of these quotes are 2022, 2019, of going and speaking with people that are key to the industry. I've got now retired generals, well, he's still a congressman, of go and try and connect with them or see one of their reports, see one of their speeches, and take down saying, okay, we said that, this technology is going to be important. Well, I have a quote here that we included in some proposal saying, we see a commercial dual-use grappler as a military need, end quote. And that is going to help show, obviously that's on the national security side, but getting those quotes from customers, whether you got them directly or you're able to point to their own resources, that XYZ industry report from this last year said that they need $1 billion of new lasers. Point to outside points as well as proving and walking through the whole scenario. So finding good citations that speaks back to my academic, nerd history. I love doing that, but it's not just having these bunch of breadcrumbs, but actually making it into something that then shows that it's a commercialization plan. And I think that's something that I've also seen from, guest viewing some proposals. You put a lot of data. This sounds great. Like there's billions of dollars. How are you going to capture a slice of it? Walk through that plan, not, a 2 hour Saving Private Ryan, but at least show me how you get to the beach. And so I think that's the piece that can be really challenging of I've just done all this technical work. I've shown there's a defense need, and now I get to this commercialization, and people are saying there's going to be a billion-dollar market. Yes, but how are you getting that market? How are you going to scale and produce? You could spend 40 pages on it, and you probably miss the point. So I think it's a huge thing that for us at KMI, we worked out, okay, let's take that 5, 10 year view, write it down. Great. Now use that to write down what we're actually putting in the proposal because you want it to be concise, specific, cited, but the key piece is showing that you can do it, you've thought through it, and showing that reviewer on the other side that you give us this faith and this trust here at phase one. We've already thought how we're going to go get the phase two, how we're going to roll it out to be dual use, and this is us showing the tips of those icebergs. But many times there's a page limit. So make sure you're putting the right amount of effort into the technical versus the commercial volumes, but it's not easy. I would easily say that the commercialization in our earliest proposals, that was the hardest part we were dinged on, which really sucked for me because of the three co-founders, that was supposed to be my domain. And so when we got dinged in my zone, I took that to heart. So it's not easy, but as you start to figure out the way to communicate it out, it's something that just rolls off me like water on a duck. So it takes effort, and too often the technical part is exciting and interesting, and commercialization just feels like an afterthought. Don't make it an afterthought. Make it as intentional as the technical work.
And to really quickly follow up on that, because I think it is a really big challenge for folks that are accustomed to working with the engineering, about de-risking, about having realistic plans, about proving the science. Sometimes commercialization can feel a little bit fabricated because you're having to you're having to make assumptions, you're having to kind of provide a pathway of where you think you want to go, based on assumptions that might be very different than what a technical founder is comfortable with assuming how things might go. How do you square that, I guess, or how have you in the past?
Discussion we were having just this morning of similar to that part is put down the assumptions. Is just the same way of you saying, yeah, if we have a spherical cow in a frictionless environment, it would go this fast. Great. If we had an environment where there's this amount of funding and we're able to prove at this point, we see that we'd be making money this way. Call out the assumptions, I think, is one of the easiest parts I've seen from people I work with, that they get stuck because they're used to calling out the physical qualifications and the chemical compounds that are going to go into the assumptions of some technical project. You have to do the same on the economic and socioeconomic side of what's the pain points, what's the fear, uncertainty, and doubt you're solving, what's the pain points you're removing for your customer. Call out those assumptions and say, because we've made it easier for them to make phone calls, they're going to want to buy our product because otherwise they're stuck, doing hand signals across the ocean. So I think calling out those assumptions in the commercial work will help elevate a lot of technical writers for where they're already strong at. Just call out your assumptions and show people the math. Because even if the reviewer is like, well, I think they're wrong about that, it's not an all or nothing if you can show your assumptions of how you built up that commercial work.
Thanks, Troy. And Rachel, I am going to ask you your thoughts on this because we are getting a lot of questions on this topic because I think there is a lot of uncertainty. But something I'll share that I've heard that I think helped it most for me to conceptualize it at a high level is, would you exist if you didn't get this award? Prove to me you would exist if you didn't get this award. If SpaceWorks just totally blew the investment, missed the opportunity of a lifetime to give you funding because you're going to be the next big thing. Show to me how you're going to be the next big thing, whether or not we give you this, whether it's $150K or, $2 million. Show me how you're going to make this happen either way, with or without us. And so I think sometimes that's the story that you need to tell, not just we have a few dollars here today, or we have a little bit of interest here today, but how are you going to get all the way there? How are you going to build a company that would exist whether or not, we make a huge mistake and don't give you the money this time. So Rachel, any other things that you've seen done right or that you would add to that?
Totally. And I think that's a great way to think about it. I will make the note that, the government does not want to invest in a company that is only relying on this one source of income to exist. That is acquiring risk. That's not the I would not say that that is like the value that we hold within the Space Force or SpaceWorks specifically. But overall, government inherently does not like risk. And so that tied to the commercialization potential, I think the way that Roxanne phrased it was a great way to think about it. Some other ways that you can also think about it, if your brain looks more for like check boxes or that like one pager thought, which I love that way to think about things too, is proving pre-sales, proving pilots, sales, revenue, active users, subscriptions if you're more software based, if you're um, capturing downloads, any other form of numbers or adoption or proof to show what you've done or what is on the horizon for you. Not just that, like, hey, the market is worth 30 billion and we expect to get 10% of that. It's really digging into how you think you're going to and saying, hey, we have a signed agreement that we're going to be the supplier for 30% of this company that already owns this much of that market. Just being really clear and digging into the numbers on that side. I know that a lot of people, that there's a range of folks who may or may not have a finance person on their team or contracted out, but just think of it as if you were the finance person for your organization, and what you would want to prove out. Pull out those numbers and really go from there. Because we've already talked between Troy and Roxanne already about the like market revenue, the overall business plan, but it's really thinking about that kind of transition strategy between where you are now and where you are going to be in the future, and just tell us more about, what you see as promising for your organization.
Yeah, I love that. Super helpful. So we hit commercialization. We haven't talked too much about mission and DoD mission, but I haven't seen many questions there yet. But maybe just quick thoughts, Rachel, on that. Like, what are like, you gotta like have some concept of what's going on and what SpaceWorks priorities are. But again, that sometimes can be another black box as well. But the fact that there's a solicitation is a good start. And we're going to use this to talk transition in a moment into open topic versus specific topics. So if you want to start peppering in some thoughts on that as well, that'd be really helpful.
So talking about defense need is, despite the fact that everyone always talks about commercialization because it's this big, oh, how do we prove it? It is tough because the answer is different for everyone. But when we talk about defense need is actually the worst part of most solicitations. And it's just accepted that it's not going to be great because it's not easy to get answers from different parts of the government, including different parts of the Space Force, on what we're looking for. That's why when we're talking about a specific topic or a challenge or something, it's really helpful because you have specifics of what is needed. And I know there are some people screaming behind their microphones right now saying it's not clear. It is not as clear as you think. And I know, I totally agree with you. There's that line between putting in too many requirements so that we don't block people out from applying, and also leaving things open for folks to propose ideas that nobody internally to the Space Force has thought about yet. But so when it comes to defense need, the reason that I see this as one of the biggest issues with everyone's proposals is just not understanding the mission need. And when I say that, I'm not putting this on you guys externally as this is your fault that you don't understand this. it's a difficult situation because we can only share so much about what we need or what we know we need. We've got experts in, very specific fields, PhDs who know one thing really, really well, and they don't know what you're building that blows all of their previous knowledge out of the water. And so they may write a spec for something, even if it is, a specific topic or challenge, and they may say, hey, here's what we want. And you may have a way to flip that on its head. So all that being said, the thing that I would do if I were you working on trying to show the defense need is to really try to understand, try to talk to guardians or airmen, if applicable, as much as possible about how your technology could apply to their work, because that's really the separation in the proposals. Is folks may come in and say, hey, here's what we can do, instead of here are some of the things that we can do and here are some of the other things that we might be able to do. You're just trying to make it easier for that evaluator who is very smart, especially in this one specific area. You want to make it easier for them to imagine your technology applying in a number of different areas. That is what will help meet the defense need. I know that is not actually helpful because everyone always wants the answer from the people who know, and they want that connection to, the operational unit that can talk to them about it. So you just try to do that, and if not, you read as much as you can, and you try to do your best guess for that one.
Thank you, Rachel. We have kind of a wave here. Folks are really, really trying to unpack commercialization a little bit more and how to communicate commercialization, because it's, maybe someone submitted something that they have some customers, but they got poor on commercialization, or they're getting guidance or have heard things around that you might have to have investment, or investment might be weighed more than a customer, or things like that. I think I want to double down and highlight your comment before, Rachel, about the full package. And I think, Troy, you got into that too. It's not just the where we are right now, it's the where we're going, it's how we're going to sustain. I am going to drop a link. One thing that I do think is helpful. So to clarify here, there was a comment at the very top around, commercial capital investment. Is a requirement to get to a phase 3? No. But to take a step back, I think I know maybe where that's coming from when we start talking about things like StratFi and TACFi awards, which I know, Troy, I would imagine that's something your company's contemplating at a point where you are right now. So curious to hear your thoughts. But when you do get to StratFi and TACFi, there is the availability to match funding. So I'm going to drop something that comes from the SpaceWorks website that's on StratFi and TACFi that does give a list of how matching funding works, because that is a big question. It is something to contemplate. Like if you are a company just getting started, you think you want to go through this whole SBIR funding pipeline that does not have to be linear, I want to say, but can include something like a StratFi and TACFi. As you get into bigger dollar amounts, you may want to do private matching funding. And so there is some general guidelines. You'll also find that they're kind of loosey-goosey in some ways. You don't have to match it like the same day. You need to match it within a couple years. There's lots of different ways you can put together a package of what your matching commercial funding might look like. So it's ambiguous. Something that we haven't talked about too much are the relationships that you start to build as you start going through this process, and that SpaceWorks is a phenomenal resource, especially once you get into that pipeline, start getting your first few awards. SpaceWorks is here to help. SpaceWorks is here to help the customer on the government side. If they want to use you, get to the point where they can with by your technology, maybe using SBIR. But okay, I just said a lot of things in that really run-on sentence here, but to sum it up, relationships are going to become important as you move through this pipeline. There are more resources that can guide you as you start getting deeper into what matching might look like. It does not have to be VC matching. Maybe Rachel can talk to us in a second about what that might look like. But first, I want Troy to talk to us a little bit about yeah, how you start pulling that together as you look like getting deeper into like the bigger awards for within SBIR and SIDR and talking to the customers that you do have that you won through your initial SBIR awards, like kind of what's happening, where are you at right now, I guess, and how, I mean, I know you're one example of many companies doing this, but talk to us about, I guess, like what new challenges you're finding as you're getting into different types of SBIR proposals and solicitations.
And I think you actually hit on one of the key parts there over the last minute or two of like, yes, there are dozens of resources. Some of them are official through Spaceworks, and we appreciate the like drip from the well we sometimes get. It feels like we're like, no, just give us the rubric, please. That's not going to happen. So I think then to your other point of multiple companies, so I can. I'll be choosing my words carefully here over the next few moments, so bear with me. Is that I can say as a company that has been at the right stage of evaluating StratFi, you can go look up all the previous winners and you can contact them. And I've talked to about most of the people who've won a space StratFi or some friends I know who did TechFis to ask their advice. And I think one of the key parts you got there is there's a almost obnoxious level of wiggle room that can happen with some of the requirements as you get to these bigger vehicles because nothing is cookie cutter by the time you get to that point. If someone is building brand new helmets or someone's building a heat shield, those could both be considered for like, this is really critical for the defense need, but the way you test a helmet is way different than testing a heat shield from space. So it's something that there's a lot of humanity in working with the contracting officers and with the program officers and the different folks who are concerned with this of no one wants to be handcuffed by, well, the requirement is you have to have it on day one, but if we can get this defense need, but you're going to have that aspect on day two, thank you for communicating that with us. I'll communicate with the other partners, and everyone's on the same page. And so I think that's been the big thing for us as we've gone through this evaluation piece is talking to the other previous winners, talking to folks that have put these proposals or these solicitations out before and said, hey, Brian, Bob, Beb, whoever you are, you may not be in that role anymore, so you might be able to speak more freely about your time setting up StratFi. One of my best advisors, she was for the nuclear side of the government system, someplace we never touch, but her insights were able to translate over to what we've been trying to do on our side. So go out to resources, make time to talk and take notes, and then follow up with those kind people who are able to give you their insights and their perspectives of, hey, we won this StratFi 2 years ago. Here's what we achieved. Here's what we struggled with. And that has positively shaped what KMI efforts are to this very day. Um, and I feel like there was another part of your question, Roxanne, that I lost there. But yes, you can turn to your resources both officially and unofficially. But was there a second part of that that I
I
lost?
guess it's because getting into some of the questions we're getting to here, which we have lots of great questions, but as you start thinking about, maybe let's hit really quick on specific topics and open topics and maybe those relationships you're developing. I had a question here about should you even apply if it's a specific topic? Because maybe someone else has already helped shape that solicitation. My short answer is yes, definitely if it's a good fit for you. But you might have different thoughts as a company. Like, how do you approach specific topic versus open topic?
If it's on our roadmap, yes. If we're
Yeah.
going to have to strong pivot the company and suddenly start doing underwater welding, that is just too far from what we're doing. We're going to be bad at it. We're going to waste time. And yeah, there might be people who are more specific and inclined to that. But don't think, oh, I didn't write that topic, so I can't win it. We have absolutely stolen someone's lunch of being selected for proposals that when we talk to the team later and start working with the government side, they're like, we didn't even know about you guys. I would have expanded or change the solicitation if I knew about you. Thank you for applying. So don't think that just because, the door is shaped a certain size, it doesn't mean it doesn't fit you. You can still fit in. You might just have to explain a little bit further, or as was mentioned a couple of minutes back, better share why you're breaking the idea of that PhD who wrote this with his best knowledge in the world, and he talked to his colleague and she said that's true, and then you blow them both out of the water. So absolutely, I do not take specific topics as a you have to have written it, but make sure it's down your path because otherwise your team and your investors and your reviewers are all gonna be like, what the heck are you doing here?
All right, thank you. So to pivot back, Rachel, just to wrap up on some of these thoughts around like the VC funding, I think there is a perception because it is pretty public that there is an interest in VC funding from the government side. Like there is an effort to get VCs more involved in this space. But I think that ties back pretty nicely to what you said about the fact that, maybe we don't want the government to be the only customer, the only person fronting the bill for this research to be developed. But are there any kind of specific thoughts or official guidance around VC participation?
So I I would say to folks that you do not need VC participation in order to go through your journey here. Phase one, phase two, for sure. Would it be helpful to have it? Yes. But that's also the same thing as saying, do we need to have a an airman or guardian who is our champion? Yes, it would be awesome to have that, and it'll probably help you go along the pathway and find the people that you need to. But can you do it without them? Yes, and many people do. The VC funding, I would say, comes in. That's a discussion that comes in later. Post phase one, phase two. That's like, that's your 301 kind of conversation. But what I would say, tying back to commercial potential, that I would just say, don't do this. Like the don't do for your proposal is don't say something like, uh, so and so supports this, and so should the DoD, right? Like, Elon supports this. We hear that a lot at conferences that folks will say, well, Elon's a backer or something, and we're saying it's great for you to have backers and backers who have a lot of context and funding and all that across the board, but we just need you to prove it in a proposal. And so if you say, hey, we've got this much backing from X company or X person in funds, or we're going to be completing 10% of their production run of fill in the blank, that's great. It just give numbers, give context, and just think of like proving where your company is going. And then you said about specific topic as well. There's just so much content here. We could talk for like 6 hours about all of this. The specific topic about really the difference between the two, I would say, if there is something like Troy said, if there's something that fits within your world, that's great for a specific topic. You do not need to participate in the workshops in order to win an award, but people who do that do get some additional context in when there's a public workshop around the topic development. But it's really just a strategic choice for your organization, whether, what works for you based on what you're building.
Oh my goodness, we are like totally out of time. Troy, a resource that you think is helpful, and maybe Rachel, you too. I got too excited. I was having too much fun. Sorry, everyone.
I am glad you asked that. I actually pulled this up at the beginning. This is from Colonel Tremelo. If I hopefully that link comes through, but he gave a presentation. This is unclassified at the State of the Space Industrial Base back in Albuquerque. If you're unfamiliar, Colonel Tremelo is the head of the Commercial Space Office, COMSO. I think I got their actual name wrong, but COMSO is what they are, and it is a guideline. If you know the Hellmeyer Catechism or you've been asking for a checklist, this has one. So I think it's a great resource that we're using very strongly internally to prep ourselves. We're using it in briefings. So I think it's just a great resource that hasn't already been mentioned. Go read what's out there. Watch the PEA, what they're putting out in their press releases or in their speeches. Go pay attention to your customer. It's the same whether you're selling sandwiches or spacecraft. You got to know what your customer wants. We have the advantage in the industry we're in that many times it's published. So it makes it a little bit easier sometimes if you could do your good diligence and homework. But I love this COMSO advice that was recently given out. So
Amazing. Thank you, Troy. And Rachel, any final resources from you?
Totally. Final resource that I would recommend is anytime there's a webinar. And I know I also hear the words webinar sometimes and want to roll my eyes at myself. But webinars, when they have them for specific solicitation or challenge, that is going to be that like one pager version that we all want to have. We want that bottom line up front. So please do attend the webinars whenever they have them, even if you just do it just to grab the PowerPoint slides, because those will often have a really simplified version of some of the information, so it's easier to unpack and really write out your proposal from there.
Thank you both so much. Dorothy, I'll give it to you for closing comments. Sorry to take us to the last second here, but what a great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries at all. Thank you, Roxanne. You did a great job navigating this conversation. And thank you, Rachel and Troy. Super appreciate all of your expertise and knowledge and insights on this. I think that hour went by super fast. It was just such a good conversation. And like Rachel was saying, so much content. We could just talk about this for hours, I'm sure. So just a couple super quick reminders. I had Ricky put some links in the chat. So we put the registration for our next webinar for August, and so that we're going to talk about beyond SBIR, TACFIs, STRATFIs, that kind of thing. And please do fill out the survey when you exit the webinar today. It really helps us, and we implement those changes and listen to your topic ideas. We'll be sending out the recording to you all, and then you can also see it on YouTube when we upload it. Follow us on LinkedIn to stay connected, and we also have our emailing list in the chat if you want to sign up for that and just stay connected on everything hyperspace. So with that, I will let you all go. We hope to see you at the next one, but thank you to our wonderful moderator and panelists, and for all of you for joining. So hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.